And just like with Huawei, all of these risks are just immediate and undeniable. So numerous studies show that internet connected EV batteries and chargers have the same sort of cybersecurity weaknesses that we see with large scale data breaches. You can even maliciously deploy malware onto your EV during charging and then monitor that EV user and even turn off their vehicle for months or even years after that initial infection. And those Chinese battery systems I mentioned are hardly safer. The potential malware could bring down entire electrical grids, studies show. And the reality is that we are already sort of deploying these systems across critical infrastructure without properly vetting them and without really thinking through some of the negative sort of ramifications here.
It's pretty remarkable how much time we spend on TikTok, for instance, Craig, but not this. I'll point you to something that Donald Trump said. I never thought I'd be pointing Craig Singleton at Donald Trump, but he made a video post on Truth Social talking about the UAW contract negotiations, the auto workers strike. And he had a message for the workers in his own special way of speaking that gets a bit to what we're talking about here, remembering that one of the real sticking points in the UAW negotiations actually comes down to EVs, the government's policy, and the way these car companies are handling them. Here he is.
You should not pay your dues because they're selling you to hell. You're going to be going to hell. You're not going to have any jobs. All those cars are going to be made in China, every one of them. You can forget it, Michigan. You can forget it, South Carolina, you can forget it, everybody. All of those cars are going to be made in China.
Is there an element of truth to that, Craig, that our lack of progress in catching up with China will mean that many of these are in fact made in China, the cars and the batteries?
I think the lessons from Huawei's deployment are really applicable here. Back then, mostly GOP-led states deployed Huawei gear as a means to address rural connectivity on the cheap. Huawei's products were the cheapest. They were ready to deploy. And so as opposed to going with Ericsson or Nokia or Siemens or a US provider, we went with China. There are many sort of analogous examples with the EV battle, where the Chinese many years ago, going back to 2015, said in their strategic planning documents that if we control the EV and battery markets, we'll have leverage over the United States and it'll help us become an economic superpower. And I think now we're starting to see that play out, where once again, the West was behind and the Chinese central planners, in this case, were sort of ahead of themselves here. The question is whether we want to rush into this green revolution and sort of embrace these untested Chinese technologies, or whether it's time to strategically hit pause and say, if we're going to deploy these things, can we do it safely? If not, what are some potential alternatives, whether they're Korean, whether they're American made, whether they're Japanese, that we can have confidence in, that we're not sort of sacrificing our future national security for these short-term energy goals.
Well, this is important. I've got less than a minute left, Craig. Time goes by when you're learning stuff. Is the administration open to this conversation?
I think a little bit. They've been very slow to acknowledge the massive cybersecurity vulnerabilities that are associated with this EV build out. But the Department of Energy and particularly the national labs have put out some really interesting, sort of scary research that shows just how easy this is. The question that we haven't sort of grappled with here is, do you have to hit pause on some of these current systems and deployments to assess their safety and security before you proceed? And here, I think the administration has been slowly sort of dragging its feet while staying very wedded to its broader EV goals. The question is, do we have an actual intelligence and technical assessment of this infrastructure, the cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and whether China can exploit them? The answer is no. Yeah. This is an area where policymakers can really start to, I think, make some serious moves, and real fast.